Fine. So, John, Manny, John, and
Hi.
now I'm going to wait. Did I got everybody? I got everybody. No, wait. John's not here. I got to get John back. That's who I've lost. He's like, who have I got? Who's not got yet? Shoot. All right. Yeah. So, all right. Wait one. I need like an extra set of hands or something.
So in the meantime, what are you guys drinking tonight?
Yeah. And put it on the list so I could
me?
the system.
Yeah, what are you guys drinking?
All I had was a little bit of lemon Jome. Today.
And I'm drinking a peach melomel that I made.
Nice.
Nice.
So you actually
Hello.
got to drink something. Hey, John, you there?
Yep, I'm here.
Okay, cool. Sorry about that, man.
No problem.
I don't know what in the world. It's Skype. It's Skype's fault. And that's my excuse, and I'm sticking with it. Have no flippin' idea what the heck happened there. It's already dumped AJ once tonight, so it's
Twice.
Skype. It's twice. Okay, it's Skype. I'm just saying.
Okay.
So
Skype's being Skyped. All right.
Yeah.
So, Manny, to catch you up, we were already talking a little bit about ingredient quality, garbage in, garbage out, and Ryan's suggestion was to go for the best ingredients you can afford. And have you got anything to add on the subject?
No, I think that's sound advice.
All right. I guess we will then move on to treating your yeast right. And I guess the first part of it is, how do you put it into the mead? A lot of us use dry yeast, and first wine kit I ever had recommended just pouring the package in dry.
Well, yeah.
Because,
That's
it's.
easy.
I think it was. I'm pretty sure it was champagne yeast, and I mean it worked out fine. But there are better ways, and I think Ryan, you wanted to talk about that.
Expect John will have something to say on that too.
I've actually read from some of the stuff on the Lauven website that when we dry pitch the yeast, it kills almost 50% of it right off the bat. The dry yeast is not, it doesn't work well with the sugar in the must, and also the temperature variance will kill it off. So I would suggest if you do want to dry pitch your yeast on top of your must to maybe double up the amount that you would traditionally use. Incidentally, it also said that through tests that they had run, and I haven't done but a couple kits myself personally, and then I just took the ingredients and disregarded all the kit information and made my own mead out of the kits.
Yeah, I hear you.
But it did say that K1V and the EC both are almost impervious to all of the things that would traditionally damage the rest of the yeast, and I'm just wondering if perhaps maybe most of the kits would boil down to maybe just a couple yeast, because the manufacturers know that they can dry pitch, a couple different strains without having any detrimental effects.
I'm pretty sure all of the wine kits that I've ever used have either been K1V or EC1118.
That wouldn't surprise me at all. You could imagine that they're just trying to make it simple for the new people that are making the kits. The last thing they probably want to hear as a kit manufacturer is somebody call up and say, I've got a bucket of must that's been sitting in my house for 10 days and nothing's going on. So I'm pretty sure that's why they do what they do.
Well, that said, also, rehydrating it properly, you can tell if it's working.
True.
It looks very different when you've pitched when you're trying to rehydrate a dead yeast pack, because I've done that. I actually had one or two packages of EC118 that were dead, and they may have been overheated due to handling and packaging at some point or something. But I've had, in all of the yeast I've ever used, I've made a couple hundred batches, I've had 2 packets that were dead, and I ended up having to pitch something else, because that was the last packets I had of those. And I don't think they were even past their best before dates either. But it can happen. And by making a starter or even just rehydrating, you can tell whether or not it's working or not.
For sure.
I think the only ones I've ever had that were dead right out of the gate were both smack packs, believe it or not.
Yeah, you can tell with a smack pack too, because it doesn't blow up.
Exactly.
Yeah.
A very definite indicator.
Yeah, for those of you out there listening, if anybody wants to call in, feel free. The call-in number is not memorized yet, and it's
803-443-6323.
That's the one. So feel free to call in. We do have a write-in question from Luis, who was on last week. Remember him? Or 2 weeks ago when John was here.
Hi, Luis.
Yeah, and Luis says he's become an AMMA member. Way to go, Luis. But he said, so here's one for you guys. He would like to make, basic question in respect to the use of yeast. The yeast ratio for a 5-gallon batch is 20 grams. So for a 25-gallon batch, I have to use 100 grams of yeast. And for a 50-gallon batch, I will have to use 200 grams of yeast. Is yeast use linear?
I would say
Seems like a lot of yeast.
Yeah, typically the yeast that I use wants 5 to 8 grams for a 5-gallon batch. Overpitching, as far as I have read, will not hurt your batch. But the thing is, when yeast divides, you've got one cell, which divides into 2 cells, which each divide into 2 cells, so you end up with 2 times 2 is 4, which each divide into 2, which is 8. So it's not linear when they divide. So if you've only got half as much yeast, it's only going to take one revolution of yeast division in order to build up your stock by double. We refer to the doubling time, which I think for yeast is somewhere between half an hour, 45 minutes, 2 hours, something like that.
Okay.
I think your doubling rate is going to depend on your situation, what you're feeding them with, whether you've used one of the rehydration aids like what is it? I can't get my hands on the stuff. GoFirm, that's the one.
GoFirm.
Yeah, if you're using GoFirm, it probably will help with that. It'll get them going faster. I've had batches where I've way underpitched and it's worked, but also the batch. They say that you should use a packet of yeast for a 5-gallon batch, and they also say you should use a packet of yeast for a 1-gallon batch. And I've done it both ways, and if it was going to work, it works.
Well, I'd like to add to that if you have a higher gravity, you also want to start to add additional yeast because they have a longer row to hoe, so to speak. And as the yeast continue to multiply and divide, they can only do that for so many times before the yeast start to become less viable. And so if we underpitch, it takes a while for the lag phase to get over before they go into the exponential growth, and that's not a good thing because that also gives the spoilage organisms an opportunity to create their biomass while our yeast is in the lag phase getting ready to go to war.
Yeah, there's another thing you can do in that case too. What I always do if I'm doing anything that's got a specific gravity over 1.125 is I make an acclimated starter to get the yeast used to the sugar amount that it's going to be in.
Yeah,
Sure.
And if nobody has heard of how to make an acclimated starter, the way I do it is Lalvan packets want you to use, I think, a quarter cup of water for 15 minutes. So I do that, and then I add a quarter cup of the must I'm going to use, and then I wait until I see activity, and then I add a half a cup of the must I'm going to use. And every time I see it being active again, which takes usually about between 45 minutes and a couple of hours. I just double the volume again until I've got about a fifth of the volume of the full batch that I'm doing. So if I'm going to do a 5-gallon batch, I will make a gallon a starter. So I'm not sure if that's an option for how you would want to do it if you're doing a 25-gallon batch. I have never worked with anything bigger than 15, and I still only have 5-gallon buckets, so I had to make 3 small batches and combine them into my big fermenter.
Incidentally, that's also. Go ahead.
The only thing I have to add to that is I can tell you that whenever I do make a nice big 1 liter starter for a 1 gallon batch, it does seem to be a cleaner ferment every time you do that instead of just pitching the package. Making a starter is kind of like the next level where your mead gets that much better.
Yeah, that's another experiment that I should probably, we should probably enlist a bunch of people who like to run experiments to do something like this, because I never have time and I don't stick to them. But
Bray's good
start
at
with
that.
the same. Yeah, exactly.
Bray!
Start with 3 gallons of the same must and divide it out into 1 gallon containers. Dry pitch one, rehydrate another, and make an acclimated starter with the third, and see what. Track them through their fermentation and compare them at the end and see, how they tasted, how they smelled, how fast they went, and whether they made fusels. Whether I don't even have any idea if it would have any kind of effect on the pH or not, but that would be another thing that I'd check if I could.
There's an awful lot of caveats in that could would need to be monitored for it to be a true test. In other words, you've got water hardness, which is an important piece to understand about rehydration, as is your temperatures, your yeast temperation, oxygenation. There's a whole lot of things that's quite important about treating your yeast right to get them off to the best start that they can have.
Well, we haven't actually gotten past pitching the yeast yet, so that was something I wanted to talk about once we got into that, because pitching it's the one thing, but you got to take care of it too, otherwise it won't take care of your mead, and you have to make sure it's got enough nitrogen, and I guess this
all those things. Go ahead.
I mean, yeah, if you're going to do a test batch, you want to treat all 3 batches, or 5 if you want to do one with hard water, one with city water, and one with distilled water, just for example. How you would want to, you'd want to set it up so that you're doing the exact same thing for all the batches, so that the only variable that you've changed is how you treated the yeast on the way in.
Mm-hmm.
And then once you figure out which one of those works best for that, then you do another batch where you're going to try different, how much oxygen it likes, and then how much, once it's really hard to narrow things down without doing it one variable at a time.
That's true, but the 4 things that I just mentioned are also extremely important just in the rehydration process alone.
Which we could
In other words, if you...
Go ahead, I'm sorry.
Well, if you look at water hardness, so here's some things to not do. Don't pitch your yeast in cold water. The reason being, if it's not between 100 and 105, the yeast is all shrunk and shriveled up because it's dry. When you put it in a cold water, it doesn't allow the cell membrane to become gelatinous enough to actually work like it's supposed to, and so a lot of the guts of the yeast cell will leach out into the water. Also, if it's too cold, when the cell membrane expands to make its shape, it'll get stuck having wrinkles in it that'll remain, the cell membrane will be wrinkled for the remainder of its life, and eventually will die because it doesn't function the way it's supposed to. So the temperatures are very important for that whole consideration of the yeast cell membrane when it's in the rehydration process itself. Same with water hardness. You don't want to put it in distilled water because there's no minerals in there. The yeast need to have between 25 and 50 parts per million of water hardness. Otherwise, they have minerals stored inside the dry yeast itself. And so when you put it in water with no mineral base into it, all of that water will scientifically be or physically being